right, what up, everybody? It's your host, George Carmi, here at the Commanders Film Room. I'm here by guy Mark Bullock. We're here for episode 2, Preseason 2 film review. Mark, how you doing today, man?
Yeah, pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing very well, man. We're just going to reflect on the Commanders. We had some good things that we came away from the game film. Just a quick reminder to all you that are joining our show, please give us a like and subscribe on YouTube at the Big Doug and Carmi Show. You can find us every single Wednesday doing a film breakdown with Mark. Mark has an excellent Substack. I definitely recommend you subscribe to that as well, where all of his written work and his film work is there to break it down. So, Mark, obviously, we walked away from our Bengals game on Monday with some great film to walk away with. And last week, we looked at the rookies, and it seems like we're going to be going that direction again. But before we get there, there's some pretty interesting news in Commanderland. Some of our veterans, some of our running back room has seen some kind of news pop up a little bit. And I'm curious to your thoughts, because last week we didn't talk about it. So Brian Robinson is on the trade block. Brian Robinson did not come to the preseason game. I'm curious of your thoughts on him potentially being a trade candidate, because it doesn't seem like he's coming back to DC next year. Are you a fan of that? What are your thoughts on the whole issue of Brian Robinson potentially leaving next year?
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that it has come to this at this stage. I did think that this time next year he probably wouldn't have been on the roster, because he's in the last year of his rookie deal, and players are always looking to get paid off of a rookie deal, and Brian Robinson, I think, is a little bit underrated by Washington fans in general, from my experience with Washington fans. But he's also a very replaceable sort of. He's a dependable mid-level running back, a very average. I don't want to say average as an insult, but he's a starting caliber running back in the NFL. But that is very replaceable, certainly in terms of contract value. Like, he's going to be looking to get a good contract, obviously into a second contract, whereas you can get rookies in the 4th, 5th, 6th, maybe even 7th, hopefully for Washington, that come in on such a cheaper contract and give you, even if they give you 70 or 80% of the production, you're still getting much better value than not overpaying, but paying more for an experienced veteran running back. So I did feel like Brian Robinson was probably entering his last year in Washington, but for it to happen now, I guess the Ben Standig thing a few weeks ago, where he mentioned it, kind of raised an eyebrow a little bit. He wouldn't put that out there without some sort of idea about that, and that's come to fruition. So credit Ben, but yeah, it's I guess it kind of makes sense. Like, if you're feeling like they can save $3 million on the cap by moving on from him this year, and they have very little dead cap for a hit for that. So it does make sense, I guess, from a contractual standpoint. And if you feel like you can get, kind of as I talked about, if you feel like you can get 80% of the production from Chris Rodriguez and Ja'Cory Groski-Merritt, then why not move on and save $3 million on the cap? Gotcha.
Before I answer that quick question, so Daniel will say what's up, Deuce, what's up, Chris, what's up? Thank you guys for joining the chat earlier on, just jumping on in here. Yeah, with Brian Robinson, it's kind of it's interesting to me. Chris talked about the money on the bottom, and you kind of alluded to it too, Mark. $3 million is significant, but I don't know how significant it is altogether in the big picture, right? I feel like he might not be a scheme fit. I think it might be the bigger issue altogether. I think they do want some explosiveness and a running back that could potentially hit a home run or have these larger gains. So maybe Groski-Merritt's performing very well, and that might be kind of pushing him out the door potentially. But for me, it's like I just don't know how much of a gain we're going to get back, and the return we're going to get back from Brian Robinson. Maybe a day 3 pick, maybe a 5th or 6th round. I kind of a little bit concerned about the depth, because I'm afraid Brian Robinson, he might not be. You kind of alluded to it. He's a solid, fine running back. I don't see the benefit of potentially having him walk. But then again, more trade assets, you never know. Adam Peters is a GM known for being able to hit on late round picks. Maybe there's something there. But that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the running back room a little bit later on in the film room. So we'll see how that looks and see how it goes. One last question before we get into it. Terry McLaurin, obviously I think you and I have been talking back and forth all year so far. I'm surprised it got to this point. I felt like Terry McLaurin was potentially going to sign a deal relatively early on. But is it a little deal, big deal, medium deal about him not showing up at the the Bengals game this past week? Like, how do you feel about that, Mark? Do you see, what are your thoughts? Where's the potential ramifications of that in your mind?
I don't see that as too big of a deal. Like he wasn't going to play. He's not practiced, and they've talked about ramping him up and slowly. And this one thing, this organization since Dan Quinn and his crew have come in, have done a really good job of is protecting players' health. And their injury record was remarkably better last year than what it has been the past few seasons.
Mm-hmm.
They do a really good job of getting guys ramped up properly, and so that when they are on the field, they've got a chance to sustain it rather than re-injure themselves. So I think they're just taking care of him and ramping him back up slowly and being precautious, especially when he hasn't participated in any kind of off-season activity at all. So he's got some catching up to do in that regard, and I'm sure Terry's been working on his own and probably privately with Jayden, but.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he'll be fine, but I don't see it as a big deal that he wasn't there on Monday night. Like he's in the building hanging out with his teammates and they all support him. So I don't think it was some sort of protest by him being like, I'm not going to be on the sideline. Like it was an excused absence. Sam Conley wasn't there and he's in kind of a situation. So I personally don't see it as a big deal.
There you go. As long as Terry is there week 1, I think everyone will be happy in regard to that. So speaking of people that are there, let's jump on to the film. And I think that's what people are here for. I'm going to break down the film. I guess we're going to start off with Conerly to kind of break it all down, correct?
Yep. We'll start with Josh Carmi. And for those that were here last week, they'll remember this first clip that I'm going to start with. And I thought the thing that stood out to me most with Conerly was the issues that I saw in his game last week were no longer issues in his game this week. And again, we're talking about a small sample size like we were last week. It was, he played a half this week. I think he played a half last week. So there was only like a handful of snaps, but there were some examples of things that I said they're not long-term issues, but there's stuff that he does have to correct. And this first play we're going to see is it a good example of that. So this was where he was getting chip help. It's an empty protection. And they've got, I think this is a wide receiver staying in to chip on the edge. And when you get chip help, typically the tackle looks to set back, allows the chip to stun the rusher and take away the threat of the speed. And then you can sit patiently and force the guy to come to you and be patient and wait for it to engage. But Conerly kind of ignores the fact that he has a chip and goes running out to try to get his hands on this guy early. But because he's got the chip, he can't get there. So we'll see that here as we play this through. And again, this is last week against the Patriots. You can see he comes out of his stance really aggressively. He's looking to get his hands on the defender really early, which isn't a bad thing. But when you have chip help, it means he's running into his chipper and he can't get his hands on the guy. And so what that does is get him out of position. You can see he's already got his hips squared to the sideline rather than the line of scrimmage because of the positioning of this chipper that's engaging, and he's trying to get onto the block, but he can't. And what that means is that he's got a real soft edge, and this guy's able to kind of work around him. And Conerly gets away with a hold, and Hartman gets the pass away, but it's not a great position to be in. And as I said last week, that's a minor issue. That's something that's fairly easily correctable, but it needed to be corrected. So this week against the Bengals, he corrected it. So we got Benson in this time, chipping on the edge. And this time you'll see Conerly, he still gains a fair bit of width, but he is more patient. He's not running towards the defender trying to get his hands on him. He's more patient. He allows the block to come to him. He allows Sinnott to go make the chip. So you'll see that here. There's an immediate difference. He's standing back. He's going slower. He's being more patient. He's allowing Sinnott to go make the chip. He's helping inside with the defensive tackle with the right guard, getting his hand in there while keeping his eye on his actual block. And you can see he's much further away. He's much deeper down rather than trying to run up and get his hands on early. And then he's patient, waits for that defender to come towards him, and that's when he gets his hands on him and he holds him off, and the ball pulls out. Plenty of time, plenty of space for the quarterback. So that's one example of an improvement from last week. Another example of an direct improvement from last week. This was one of the negative reps. He got beat on an inside move. And something I talked about last week was he was really emphasizing getting a lot of width rather than depth. And when he was getting width, that's not a bad thing. But when you're doing it consistently, you're almost oversetting outside and you're leaving a path inside. And you see the defender taking advantage of that here. So he gets a lot of width. You can see he's getting multiple steps outside. He's getting a lot of width, but not a lot of depth. And what that does is create space between himself and the right guard, and the defender slips the block and gets inside. Fortunately, they've got a line slide on, so the guard's able to help out, the center's able to help out, and they're able to pick up the guys on that side. But he got beat inside on that one because he was gaining too much width and trying to get hands on early. So this week against the Bengals, similar situation, edge rusher coming off the edge, and he tries to the inside move. But this time we see Conerly be more patient. He still gains width, but again, that's not a bad thing. But you can see his angle is automatically deeper than it was last week. Last week he was getting a lot more width. This time he's getting a lot deeper. And you don't have quite the same angle to get the perspective on that, but it is deeper. And you can see he gets just the difference here is you can see he's a lot deeper and he's not immediately trying to get his hands on the guy. He's being a little bit more patient. He's allowing the block to come to him. And what that means is when the defender starts to stutter and move inside, he has that little bit of cushion between himself and the defender to start redirecting to get back inside and cut off that rush. And so you can see that he redirects, he gets his foot back inside, gets his hand inside to cut off the rush, and he does a real nice job of getting underneath, hooking the defender, and then flipping his hips and getting himself back in front of the guy to cut off that inside rush. And you can see he gets himself
excellent block. Wow.
To the right side of the guy and holds him off. And the defender still manages to generate some pressure, but Josh Johnston's able to get his throw away. It is unfortunately intercepted, but we'll
cut that out of the film. No, that's all. I'm just joking. But it's interesting because I think you and I've been watching Josh Carmi for a little while now. It's probably our third breakdown of him. We all know he's an excellent athlete, but we also talked about his technical skills and his cerebral skills as well. It's nice seeing almost immediate growth. And that one last play he just showed, like he clearly had superior position. He was ready to receive the defender. And even though he did get pushed back, he had the ability to receive the defender, pivot, and kind of push him away from the quarterback. So it was good positioning there.
Yeah, and it's quite drastic improvement from what we saw the week prior, where he did get beat inside and he needed the guard to help him out, whereas this time the line was sliding the other way. He didn't have the guard to help him. You could see he got more depth at the snap, was a little bit more patient, allowed the block to come to him, and that meant that he had that little bit of extra cushion between himself and the defender to redirect, get back inside. Because you're right, he is very athletic. He has the athleticism to redirect and cut off those inside moves. He just needs the space, gives himself the space to do it, right? So so those were two really encouraging signs. I thought with compared to last week, some little technical issues that he ironed out pretty immediately, which is a really good sign going forward. One of the other things that I think has been the major talking point with Conerly is kind of his strength and ability to anchor against like NFL caliber defensive linemen and being able to handle power rushes as opposed to just he has the athleticism to cut off speed rushers on the edge, but it's when those speed rushers convert to power or when he has to take on those bigger defensive linemen that are more powerful, it's how he adapts to that. And this one is a little example showing that the technique and the lower body strength is improving. You can see this is a play action pass, so they're going to pull Chris Paul from left guard and he's going to come and block the guy on the edge. And Conerly's going to block down inside like they would on a kind of a power run scheme. But it's a play action pass, so he's going to end up having to block this defender in a pass set. Now, this is a big defensive tackle. This is a bigger body than what he would typically have to block on the edge. And those guys typically aren't known for their speed. They're known for their power, right? So that gives him a different challenge. And that's the challenge that we're kind of worried. How is he going to adjust in his first year against more powerful rushers? But we'll see here. He comes off the ball. And again, there's a play action fake. So that it's a little bit different rather than just a straight drop back pass. And you can see initially he gets a little bit, the defender gets under him a little bit, knocks him back a little bit. But the encouraging part is he recovers from this position. So you can see he's been knocked back a little bit. He's exposed his chest a little bit. He's been popped upright a little bit, but he's able to recover and he fights. He gets himself back down low. The view's kind of blocked by Chris Paul. You can see he gets himself back down low. He gets himself inside. He gets his hands on the chest of the defender. And he's able to drop anchor and stop the guy driving him back. You can see he's not given up a lot of depth while still getting knocked back. And you can see here he's actually dropped anchor and he's now gaining control of the block. And they're still only a yard or two beyond the line of scrimmage, so there's still plenty of gap between himself and the quarterback. So you can see the encouraging thing to take away there is that despite that being a big defensive tackle, it should, in theory, have more power than those edge rushers that are, 250 pounds, whereas those big interior guys are 300 pounds. He was still able to anchor despite giving up leverage initially. He was able to drop an anchor. He was able to withstand the rush and then hold his position without giving up too much depth, which is encouraging. It suggests he's improving in that regard as a guy that can block power.
Very encouraging sign. I know we broke down some film as time has gone on with him. I feel like he does a pretty good job of recovering, right? He does what coming out of college, the power, how much power he has was a question. I've always found that he can get in front of a defender because he's quick enough. He can receive the defender, but maybe the anchoring and the be able to get pushed back was always an issue for him. But it just seemed like he kind of recovered there and did a pretty good job. So it's good.
And then this one was another one where he just does a really nice job blocking basically a bull rush. It's not quite exactly a pure drop back situation where he's one-on-one with this guy. The line is sliding and he does have help inside, but we'll play this through and you'll see that it's pretty decent effort. And let me roll this back so we can get through the details of it.
Sure.
So things we talked about last week, he was getting a lot of width rather than depth. Here you'll see him getting the angle is a lot better compared to last week. The angle was really wide last week. And again, there are times when you want to do that, but you also want to be able to have the ones where you're getting a little bit more depth than width. And you can see the angle here is a lot more 45 degrees rather than flat. And that gives him that little bit extra depth while still gaining width. And that gives him a little bit more time for these rushers to approach him. And what he does with that time, you see the first step, a lot more vertical, more 45, and he gets a lot more depth. And you can see he's about as deep as any other lineman. He's about as deep as Trent Scott. Scott's a little bit deeper. He's getting a lot more vertical, but he doesn't have the athleticism that Conerly has to match a speed rusher. So he needs to get deeper, right? So by getting to this position so quickly and getting enough depth, he gives himself time to allow this rusher to come to him to set himself up for it. So you can see he's nice and balanced. He's in a really set position. He's got his weight over his feet rather than lunging forward or falling backwards. He's in a nice balanced position, good posture, ready to receive the defender. And then you can see when the defender realizes that he hasn't got any kind of threat of a speed rush outside because Conerly's quicker than him, he tries to go for a bull rush and he tries to get his hands inside. And Conerly, we talked last week, he had an exposed chest. This week, you can see his hands are inside and he gets his hand on the chest of the defender. And then you can see what he does is he drops anchor, he gains width on his feet, he spreads them apart, and you can see he drops anchor and he's got a really good position. That's a really nice, strong, powerful base. He's got using the full length of his reach to get his hands on the chest and stop the defender from being able to get his hands on him, and he's able to keep that defender at arm's reach. He's not giving any ground, he's not getting pushed back. He's just holding a really strong, powerful position.
That's ideal. Looks great.
And the defender can't really do much about it. And it's just a really nice rep. I think I got one more, which is also just another really nice rep that reinforces, he's getting a little bit more depth rather than width on the drop, on the kick set, gives himself time, allows this rusher to, he cuts off that speed threat, forces that rush to come inside to him. And then again, you see the hands striking to the chest of the defender. He gets his hands inside. He's cutting off that speed rush. He's not getting anywhere outside. Drops that anchor. You can see, again, in a really strong, powerful position, wide feet, straight back, able to not lose any ground here. He's able to stonewall this defender at this point. Hands fighting to stay on the chest of the defender and keep his leverage, maintain his leverage, still not giving up any ground at all. The defender's having to go to plan C here, try to get back outside, and Conerly's cutting that off, and he's just dominating the rep. So really, really nice from Conerly there. So yeah, I think in pass protection, lots of positives, really good signs. Obviously, you'd like to see him against some top pass rushers, and the Bengals' top pass rusher is in a contract holdout right now, so
yeah,
you get to see him in that kind of regard, but the signs from week to week are really positive. So
yeah, I was going to ask you, it seems like a generally positive review so far, at least with pass blocking. Looks like we're going to get run blocking in a moment. I guess quick question, would you say he was better this week than last week? Seems like a pretty easy answer there. Okay. And then last week, one of our concerns was he wasn't really varying his sets. There wasn't a lot of like diversity. Are we seeing more diversity with the way he protected this week, or how do you? Or still work in progress?
It wasn't necessarily more diversity. He was using pretty much the same set over and over, but it was a more
refined, cleaner.
It was just that the set was more versatile, more adaptable to different rushes, because it was like a 45-degree angle, as we talked about, rather than being really flat. Like being flat, you can get that width and you can create a really wide pocket, and that's a good thing in a lot of situations, but it can expose a tackle to certain situations as well. Whereas that 45-degree angle is that nice in between. It gives you options where if the guy is going speed, you're still going to be able to cut that off. If he's going to convert to power, you have that little bit of cushion to prepare yourself. As we saw, if he guy tries to cut inside, you have that little bit of cushion, that little bit of extra time to redirect and get back inside. So it's probably a little bit of a safer set. In an ideal world, you're mixing up the two sets that we saw this week, and even a more vertical drop than what we've seen, the quick set that we saw last week and that kind of thing. You want to mix all of those into your game. You want to have all of those in your arsenal. And I think he does. Like we saw that in college. That was something he definitely had. But I just think it was a safer set from him this week, as opposed to getting so much width last week. That felt like just almost like a point of emphasis for him. Whereas this time it was more natural, more of that 45-degree angle, which is just generally safer for more situations.
Gotcha. I agree with that, and I think that's a good point. Thank you, Chris, for asking the question, and we can talk about this real quick, Mark. What do you guys make of the George Fant signing? Is this so Wiley can cover inside and Fant be a swing guy? Still no word on what's wrong with Coleman. I'm still kind of investigating that on my own. I think it is kind of eye-opening, right? I mean, I know they do care about having depth at the offensive line. They clearly approached that this offseason by adding more depth, and you can't get too deep in regard to offensive linemen. But that is eye-opening. Brendan Coleman's been out for a little while now. They've been kind of hush-hush on the injury, so maybe they do just want to have some depth to kind of cover their bases a little bit there. I didn't really follow George Fant too heavily, so I don't really know what he truly offers, but I think it's more of a depth piece. And I think, Cosby's still a work in progress as well in a couple of weeks into the year too. So I perceive it more depth. I don't know. Maybe it's a tryout player for now, but I don't know if you have any perceptions, or Mark, what are your thoughts?
It's definitely depth rather than like a starter. The starters are going to be Tunsil and Conerly. I think the potential implication of it is I think their backup centers after Yadish aren't great. At Dieter, we saw struggle last year a lot, and he struggled in the first preseason game to the point where in this preseason game, Julian Good-Jones was playing with the second team O-line as the center, and Dieter played right guard, which I thought was a pretty bad spot for Dieter to be in. But we saw Julian Good-Jones got cut about an hour before this show. I think he got waived injured, so he'll revert back to IR if nobody claims him. But so my guess is the implication is Nick Allegretti is basically the backup center, and he's going to be playing right guard until Cosmi is back. When Sam Cosmi is back, Nick Allegretti is the backup center, Andrew Wiley's the backup guard, and then Fant would be the backup tackle. That is how I would see it currently. That's obviously subject to change, but I don't think, like, Trent Scott's been fine, and I know they like Trent Scott, and he was not good in that playoff game where he stepped in at guard when Cosmi went down, and he has some tackle guard flexibility, but I wouldn't feel great about him having to start for a long period of time, and so is he more of a 9th, 10th lineman than a guy that you want as a primary backup option? Probably that is how I'd see it. And they haven't really shown none of the other tackles. Like I'd hoped that Foster Sarrell would or Sarrell Foster, which way is his name now? No, his first name's Foster. I'd hoped he would show a little bit more than he has in preseason. I think I saw him playing right guard rather than left tackle in the Bengals game at one point. So I guess he's not shown what they had hoped at tackle, and that probably has led to them going down the route of signing a guy like Fant.
Makes sense. Thanks, Mark.
We talked about Conerly as a pass protector. Good signs, all encouraging. Really happy with that. Run game continues to be really good. last week we talked about how coming out of college, he didn't necessarily show the thump and the power that he had in the run game, because the scheme that they ran, it was a lot of zone and it was kind of backside cutoffs, but you didn't see the kind of nasty attitude that you like to see from offensive linemen. In this scheme, there's a lot more down blocks, powerful, like move defenders out the way kind of thing. And he's showing that he's up to that task. And we saw it last week and we saw it again this week. So we'll see more of this play later on, but the main point of this is Conerly is down blocking this defensive tackle. His job is to shove him down the line, wash him out the play. They want to get a seal here for these two pullers to seal outside and create a lane. And you will see they create that seal pretty well. And Conerly comes off this snap, knocks that guy, defender, back. They drive him back quite considerably. And you can see the seal created now. Bates does a really nice job here as well. Again, we'll talk about more crossing merit later. But the lane is created for Conerly's perspective. He did a really nice job on his down block, shoving that guy inside and driving him backwards. So that was a really nice block in the run game. And then one more block that I thought was a really nice block that might go under the radar a little bit. This was a little trap scheme run that, again, we'll see a little bit more later on. We'll break down the details of this run a little bit more later on. But from Conerly's perspective, he's blocking this guy on the edge here. And typically this is just a little kick out where you just got to hold them on the edge. But I just want to point out the amount of displacement he gets. So notice that Conerly is starting this on the hash marks and the defender is maybe half a yard or a yard outside the hash mark, right? So we'll run this play forward and you see that Conerly gets into a really nice position. It's exactly where you'd want it to be, and he's able to shove that defender further outside. And look at this now that Rodriguez is coming to run that way. Conerly started on the hash mark. He's now a yard and a half outside the hash mark. The defender started half a yard outside the hash mark and is now
like 5 yards.
Yeah, he's way outside the hash mark.
Yeah.
So it's just a kick out block. It's not the most difficult block he'll ever have to make, but it's a good one. It shows that he's getting displacement. He's doing more than what he just has to do. And he continues to drive the guy backwards, and that creates this space for Chris Rodriguez to go and make his play inside and go pick up a nice gain. So
good run. Good run right there.
Yeah, we'll come to more of that scheme a little bit later with Chris Rodriguez and the running backs, but I just thought that was a nice play to highlight and wrap up Conerly. I think he's doing way better in the run game than I thought he would. He's showing way more power and thump than I expected, because he didn't show it in college. And his pass protection, I always thought was his strength, but we're seeing him improve week on week, which is really good to see. So I don't have anything but positive things to say about Conerly, and that's a really good sign for Washington going forward.
Absolutely. Quick question before I know I'm actually really excited about the Jaylen Lane parts. I want to jump through it, but just quick question: do you feel comfortable with potentially Conerly starting week 1, or do you think you saw some areas growth? Okay, you're good to go with that.
I think that might be forced a little bit anyway if Brandon Coleman's not ready and Andrew Wiley's going to play left guard, but. I think Conerly would. I think I'd probably just throw him in anyway.
Get him exposure, right?
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. He's showing that he's steadily improving, and I'm not seeing any reasons where it's like, oh, that's a glaring hole in his game, and that's going to get exposed by whatever pass rusher the Giants are going to throw at him. I think we're seeing improvements, and I think he'll be absolutely fine. If he has any kind of struggles, they showed last year they have the game plan to help out an offensive lineman. I'm sure they'll be running the ball a lot anyway, and they can chip help and stuff like that if need be. So but I think the improvements that Conerly showed with the better angles on his sets and the sort of signs of him being able to handle power a little bit better than I was expecting to at this point is all positive. So yeah, I'd throw him in there.
All right, there you go. Mark, we're going to transition to Jaylen Lane right now. Actually, I feel like he had a pretty good game. I know with our last conversation, we talked about how he was getting open. It seems like you're going to talk about that right now. Yep. It was nice seeing some production and some good hands. There were some difficult catches, and I thought it's interesting. I hope he can contribute, because if he could contribute, I think our offense could be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I was really encouraged by this performance. I was encouraged last week, and I tried to demonstrate that last week, that there were really good signs of what he could do. I thought I'd just recap a little bit of that before we get onto this week. So the thing that stood out last week was obviously the speed, and we see him in the slot here, and this is just him running a kind of deep corner route, and he just beats the slot corner off the line with a nice little stutter and then bursts, and he's just beyond him and runs beyond him. And so we can see that here. We'll just see the speed, little stutter, accelerate, burst, and he's already by the guy. And in another world where the quarterback's not pressured, there's a throw there to be made, and it's just good speed. You can see here he's got 2 or 3 yards on the defender, and that speed is really, really valuable in what it can do to an offense, but it can also terrify a defender. And we saw that a little bit later on in that same game, where this is the same corner that was just up and pressed on him. Now he's a little bit further off. He's like, okay, I've got that speed. I've got to give myself a bit of a cushion to handle that speed. And Lane shows some really nice details in his route here to attack a defender in off coverage and use the threat of his speed to create separation. So rather than just running to his landmark and breaking back to the ball on a curl route, I think this is a 3rd and long, and they run a little chains concept where the first down markers are around about that 30, and they're just breaking back to the ball on that 30. Rather than just sprinting straight upfield and turning back, he does a little subtle angle to his route. He kind of angles his route outside. You'll see that the defender is just that little bit outside leverage on him, and he angles his route to the outside to force that defender a little bit wider. He knows that defender is playing with outside leverage, so he needs to maintain it. And by angling that route a little bit more, he forces the defender to stay a little bit wider, and that opens space inside. And so when he then bursts back inside, he gets the defender worried about, oh God, I'm actually giving up a post route here. I need to do what's called a speed turn to get back on top of it. And that's when the defender turns his back to Lane, and Lane's able to break it off. So we'll show that through here. You can see off the snap, he just angles slightly outside, forcing that defender to widen. You can see he gets to that 35, 36 yard line, and he puts his foot in the ground, and the defender, you can see he opens his hips to the sideline. He's worried about that vertical speed that he just got beat by. And so that defender turns, and you can see he's now executing that speed turn as Lane angles back inside. It's, oh no, I'm getting beat to the post. I need to do a speed turn where I turn my back and just flip my hips around and sprint back to stay on top of it. And that means he loses sight of both the quarterback, but also Jaylen Lane. And Lane knows that. And so Lane is able to break off his route while the defender's turned and trying to find him. And that means he creates 5 yards of separation at the top of the route. So that was a really encouraging sign for me. You see lots of little details in his route running. And that wasn't just the really encouraging thing was it wasn't just a one-off. We saw it in this game as well. So this time against the Bengals this week, this was his first catch. It was another curl route, but this time he's playing on the outside. And this is an interesting one because the Bengals are showing sort of press man coverage with 2 deep safeties, but they actually rotate to cover 3. So just before the snap, this defender is going to bail back a little bit, and then at the snap, he's going to bail back to play a deep third of the field as a deep defender. And that impacts how Lane runs this curl route, and you'll see that on the next play, how it should have been run against press coverage, but this is how he runs it against a zone coverage like this. So when he sees this guy bailing off, he adapts his route, and instead of running just again straight up the field and curling off and breaking off his route to the quarterback, what he does is he notices again that the defender's playing outside leverage. He's a deep third defender. He's got to stay outside, and he widens his path again, and he forces that defender wider, and he threatens him with his speed again. So we'll run this on. You can see just before the ball snapped, the corner turns his hips and is ready to bail out. Now the ball is being snapped, and he's bailing out deep and trying to stay on top of the route. Lane is eating up that cushion real quick, and you can see he's angling outside, and what he's angling to is the corner's blind spot. Now, corners hate having receivers in that blind spot for obvious reasons. They can't see where the guy is. They don't know what he's doing. Is he now just running beyond him, or is he breaking it off and sitting back underneath? What's he doing? So the corner then has to start really pumping his feet and getting back deep and trying to stay on top of the route because he's worried about the receiver getting his blind spot and running beyond him. So he gets back deep to give himself more vision, and of course that means Lane can then just sharply break off his route and create this separation where the corner is still taking steps back to stay on top of it. and it's a really sharp break. And again, 5 yards of separation.
Yeah.
Good catch and picks up a first down. Now on the next drive, we see how that route would be different if the guy did play press coverage, because this time the corner is up in press, he's playing man coverage, and so that changes how Lane has to run the route. It's the same basic kind of curl route, but this time the defender's up in press coverage and trying to get in his face and disrupt him. So this time, instead of taking kind of an outside release and working wider to widen the defender, this time he's going to give a little stutter and then burst inside and get inside of the defender. So we'll just see that off the snap, because this is a really good little stutter, jab, burst inside, too quick for the defender. The defender tries to get a jam and disrupt him, but he's just too quick and he can't stay with him. Immediately, he's got a step on the defender. The defender's kind of in panic mode, like, I need to get my head down and get sprinting because the lane's just going to run by me if this is a go route. And of course, you can see the defender's not even really looking at him at this point. He's, as I said, head down, sprinting, worried about getting beat deep. And of course, what that means is that Lane can break off his route quite sharply and is in position to create, again, separation. The ball's coming out. It's pretty much on time, maybe a little bit late or a little bit floaty, but he gets that pass and he does a nice job of coming back to the ball to maintain his separation from the defender. Makes the catch and turns up the field, gets another nice first down. So that just shows that, he's able to understand that routes need to be run slightly differently depending on what the coverage he's facing is. And those little details, being able to adjust those routes based on the coverage, is not something you see from a ton of rookies. You see it from obviously the good ones, but from a 4th round pick, you don't expect to see that kind of level of detail, especially from a guy that his college system was not anything like that.
I was going to bring that up for sure.
Yeah, it was all the kind of Debo gadget stuff, jet sweep, swing screens, that kind of thing, or just go routes. It was never anything like curls and stuff like that. So that's really encouraging.
Just to add on to that, so it was nice to kind of see the nuance that he had on that run. And that last play, when you broke it down, it was clear that cornerback was flustered, right? He was, sprinting, not playing proper position, just being turned around a little bit. Jaylen did a good job. It was a big game, 15, 20 yards, good play.
Yep. And the reason why that corner was flustered and sprinting is the speed. And we talked about it at the start and last week, the speed threat is a threat and it is legit. And these are 2 plays where he doesn't get the ball, but just shows, again, the speed is legit and it doesn't matter what the coverage is. So this time we're getting a quarters coverage. You got 4 defenders, all responsible for a deep quarter of the field. This defender is responsible for staying on top of Lane on a go route. But we'll just see Lane's quick. He eats up that cushion real quickly. This corner maybe gets a little bit nosy, thinking this is an in-breaking route and wants to try to get inside on that rather than playing what he's meant to be doing. But he's still, turned and sprinting, working to try to stay on top of Lane, and Lane just runs by him and down the sideline. And you can see on the other side of the field, Luke McCaffrey also runs by his guy. So credit to Luke for doing that. But if you also look at where they are on the field, that's the 15-yard line. Jaylen Lane's a step beyond that. Luke McCaffrey is a step behind it. And that might not feel like a lot, but that just shows the difference in the speed there. Like, Luke McCaffrey is not a slow receiver, but Jaylen Lane is a fast receiver, and he's got a couple yards on Luke at that same point. So again, that just shows the speed threat is there.
I want to see. Sorry to interrupt you. I want to see Jaylen Lane with Jaden Daniels. I want to see them together because that's a ball that potentially Jaden will take a chance on, throw it deep right there. It'd be very interesting to see. Quick aside, Mark. Speaking of McCaffrey, did he pop on film? Did you notice anything? Are you disappointed? Is there things that we don't see? Or what were your thoughts on him?
He had 2 plays like that where he just ran by coverage and didn't get seen or thrown to. Otherwise, there wasn't a huge amount to talk about with him. He didn't stand out massively. He didn't stand out as a terribly bad receiver, but he also didn't stand out as he was doing this and that, and just the quarterback play was terrible and never found him. That's kind of how I feel like Lane stood out, in that he was doing a lot of things and getting open and showing really nice talent and being missed one way or another. McCaffrey wasn't doing that. He had 2 plays where he did just run by the coverage and didn't get thrown to, but Otherwise, it was, it was, just nothing particularly noticeable. Which, is a little bit discouraging. You'd hope he'd be a little bit further along at this point, but I'm not going to overreact to, a couple of preseason games. And it was always a bit of a project, considering his background being a quarterback switching to receiver. And they bet on the character, and it was a long-term bet. And it was also their 6th pick of the top 100 last year. So they nailed the important one of Jaden Daniels. They seem to have hit on Brandon Coleman and Mikey Sanders still. The jury's still out on Sinnott and Johnny Newton. If one of those hit, they're hitting on 4 out of 6 of those first 6 picks. So it's not the end of the world if 1 or 2 of them do end up as busts. And I'm not saying that's what Luke McCaffrey is, but I think people need to understand with draft prospects, like, everyone expects you to hit on like 70 or 80% of your draft picks, and that's just not the case most of the time. Most of the time, your hits are 2 or 3 players per draft class.
Exactly right. If you get 3 or 4, then you're ahead of the game, right? You want 2 to walk away with it. That's exactly right.
If you hit like 5 picks in a draft class, that's setting you
historic
up to become a really good draft class and a really good team for a while. Right, and then one more on Lane's deep speed. This is just another one where, again, this time the corner's up in press coverage. Lane just burns him, and you can see another little stutter at the snap, and then just bursts by the guy, and he's got a step beyond him. The defender has to grab him and gets away with a pretty significant hold on the jersey there. I'll run this back so you just see that, and you don't miss the fact that the defender definitely grabs his jersey and stops him. Where's the grab? Right here, you can see the inside hand or the left arm of the defender reach out and grab the jersey and pull Lane back, and you see that causes him to stumble. Rather than just running way beyond him. But he still had a step on him, and the ball was thrown to Sinnott instead, and incomplete. But
one thing I want to say, you and I are in the business of like positive disposition. We're always rooting for players, and we want to kind of portray them objectively, right? But I just do want to say, being there at the game, Hartman just had a really tough game. It seems like his arm and his zip and his velocity really isn't there at the NFL level, and almost every single ball was almost contested and intercepted. I'm concerned. I hope he can turn things around. I'm rooting for him, but it just looked kind of rough last game. And now, Marcus, what's up? I see you sent in us in the chat. What's up, Marcus? How you doing, man?
Yeah, so I agree. Like, Hartman has been rough in preseason. The one caveat I'd put to that is Kingsbury said in the presser a few weeks ago that, like, he was still recovering from a shoulder surgery that he had in the offseason. Now, he was never had the strongest arm anyway. But if you're still working through things with your shoulder, that's obviously not going to help with velocity and zip on the ball. So that's the one caveat I would put to that. But I would say certainly the way he's played in preseason so far has not been good, and is trending to him not making the roster. But we'll see how he does in the final preseason game. One more route on Jaylen Lane. We have what everyone saw this route as a really good route and an excellent catch to add on top of it. So this is a deep out route. And again, there's some really nice details in what he does in this route. It's not just straight up the field, straight out. It's setting up the route, setting up the defender, attacking his leverage, and creating the best position for himself to be successful. So he's in the slot this time rather than playing outside. And he's working against the slot defender who is just a little bit off the line of scrimmage and just playing a little bit outside leverage. And that's an important note. So off the snap, you can see he just hints towards working outside. You can see he's attacking the outside. He angles his route slightly outside. He gives a strong jab step outside to get that defender just to open his hips outside. And as soon as that defender opens his hips outside, Lane shows his burst again to change direction and sharply cut back inside and release inside, getting that defender to do, again, that speed turn where he turns his back on both the quarterback and the receiver, loses track of exactly where the receiver is, and that gives Lane all the leverage that he needs on this type of play. Again, you see at this point, the corner is just fighting to try to stay on top of what looks like it's just a go route straight up the seam and would be an easy touchdown. And that's when he is just focusing on running beyond it, and that's when Lane can break down and sharply cut across his face and get underneath him and work back outside, and that's what he does. The defender grabs his jersey pretty blatantly there to stop him. But you can see there again the jersey grab. But Lane does a really nice job laying out for it, making a diving catch. I'll show the end zone angle as well, I think, where I think it just about shows the end of the catch. Yeah, here we are. Nice catch, diving
Great
hands, catch away from his body, defender all over him, pulling his jersey and what have you. Great catch, great concentration to complete the catch to the ground and not let the ball hit the ground and bounce out. So
Mark, that was encouraging to me, man. I know it's very early to say, but that kind of it encouraged me. It's making me a believer. It seems like he's getting open. It seems like there's some areas of growth. Now, obviously, as a rookie, but that's a great catch. You're seeing some nuance in the route running, using his hands to receive the ball. I'm pretty happy with Jaylen. I think there might be a larger role for him upcoming. Caleb brought a question up in the chat. I'll sort of answer, but I'll throw it back to you. What's up, Caleb? He said, do you think Jaylen struggled in week 2? I don't think so. I think he had a pretty solid week. What do you think, Mark?
Sorry, you cut out a bit. What was the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. The question said, do you think Jaylen Lane struggled in preseason week 2? I would like to say I think he had a pretty strong game, right? So I walk away from that.
Yeah, no, I was really encouraged by him. I don't think he struggled at all. I thought he showed some really nice progress, both especially on the outside, where the way they use outside receivers is more of a vertical route tree, and he shows right now that he obviously has the speed to be a legit vertical threat, but he also has the nuance in his route running off of that vertical route tree, as we saw those kind of curl routes and stuff, where he can use the threat of his speed to get defenders worried and get them deep to create separation as he breaks back to the ball. And that's something where when you saw Dyami Brown with them in the past few years, he had the speed to get deep and threaten deep, but he didn't have the nuance in his route running to create the separation on the underneath stuff off of that threat of the deep ball. And that was why Dyami Brown struggled until his final year here. Whereas Jaylen Lane's already showing that he's got a little bit more to his game than just being a go ball runner. He can run routes off of that threat and manipulate coverage to create separation for things underneath. And that was I don't want to get into the lofty expectation things, but just as an example, Deshaun Jackson was obviously one of the greatest deep threats in the NFL. And his speed was so terrifying. He'd run one go route at the start of the game, and then he could run 10 hitches in a row, and no corner was within 10 yards of him because they were too terrified of getting beat deep. And that's the kind of example where you use your speed threat to open up those underneath routes because guys are just too scared of getting close to you. And so that's the kind of thing.
Forward planning. Yeah, the setup. It's good. It's great.
That's what Lane has shown that he can offer, whereas that was something that a guy like Dyami Brown didn't necessarily have to his game until last year. He improved that a little bit in that regard last year.
Yep.
Right. So that was Jaylen Lane. Then the next topic was running backs. We talked about it at the start. Brian Robinson obviously looks like he's done in Washington, and we'll see whether that ends up as a trade of a kind of late round pick swap, or whether that ends up as just him being cut. But it seems like his time in Washington is done. So the replacement for Robinson is an interesting one because obviously with Robinson out of the room, the best running back would be Austin Eckler, but he's kind of in that third down back role. They probably don't necessarily want to give him too much of a workload. And if you go off of the roles that they had at running back last year, it was kind of, they had a workhorse back that took the bulk of the carries on first and second down, and that was Brian Robinson. And then they had a third down back that was more of a pass catcher and pass protector, and would come on the field for some two back looks as well. So they'd have plenty of snaps, but they wouldn't be getting 15 and 20 carries a game. And that was Austin Eckler's role as the third down back. And then Jeremy McNichols kind of backed up both spots for a while, but they kind of feel like he's more of an Eckler backup than a Brian Robinson workhorse backup. And that's why Chris Rodriguez late in the year got called up, and he became the kind of Brian Robinson backup. Now, Chris Rodriguez is the guy that got the start in this game as the kind of primary workhorse back, and then him and Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt, the rookie, we're going to call him Bill for the rest of the show just because it's easier. Him and Bill kind of rotated throughout the game in that role, certainly throughout the first half and into the third quarter for Bill. So we got to look at both of them, and I just thought we'd take a look at some of their run schemes and show how well those guys did. So we'll start with where they started their first run in the game. It's a really nice scheme, and Chris Rodriguez did a nice job on this, but I kind of felt like it was more scheme based than Rodriguez doing anything amazing. So it's what's known as crunch, which is a trap scheme plus a wham scheme, and essentially the idea is that you have multiple offensive linemen pulling back and trapping. So you have the left guard is going to pull and trap the edge defender on the backside. The right guard is going to pull and trap the nose tackle, and then you've got John Bates here on the end acting as a sixth offensive lineman. And this is something we talked about a few weeks ago with John Bates being so valuable as a blocker. He's going to trap the three technique defensive tackle. What that does is allows Conerly to go block the edge defender, allows Biotis to use his athleticism to climb up to the second level and block the linebacker. And same thing with Wiley using his athleticism to climb up and get the linebacker on the backside. And so you'll see the trap schemes we run it through here. Bates sells this trap a little bit more than every other lineman. The other line, you can tell that he's a tight end that knows he's a little bit more athletic. A, he's just a little bit slower off the snap. B, he sells it a little bit more. You can see these linemen are immediately working to get back and trap their guys, whereas Bates leaves this a little bit late, takes that jab step outside to not give away that he's coming to trap this guy, which makes him slightly late to it. And what that means is that Chris Rodriguez, as he's getting the ball here, is faced with this guy in his face thinking, oh, that's not the best look I want to be running into. But he stays really disciplined. And the reason he stays disciplined, he might think, if I get really skinny, I can just get through this lane here and hit the open field that way. But what he does know is he's got this trap block coming from Bates. And once Bates engages with this defender, he's going to be knocking that defender inside, and that gap's going to shrink very quickly. So instead, what he does is he trusts Bates to get there, and he helps Bates out. So he widens his path and brings this defender into Bates's block. And you can see that he just takes this cut outside, lets Bates get the block and recover the block, and then you can see the lane opens up inside for him. And you see on the edge here, we get some nice blocks from Biotis and Josh Conerly sealing that lane on the outside for him, and Rodriguez does a nice job again. After once making one cut outside to get around Bates's block, he then makes another cut to stay inside of this seal, and then he bursts up the field and he's off to the races, breaks through an arm tackle from the corner. The safety does catch him, but not till he gets 40 yards down the field.
And it's so funny, Mark, you and I have been doing film study for like almost a year now, but we'd always thought about geometry and angles and timing. It was just the perfect timing, right? Like that Bates, that slight hesitation off the start, allowed the defender to kind of get upfield. They got blindsided by him as Chris Rodriguez went on that wide gap and created that large hole. That was a great play.
Yep. So that was Rodriguez's first run. Then Bill came in for the next drive, and he got his attempt. Now, he didn't get quite the same amount of scheme help on his first run. This was I think it's kind of a duo play, but they don't get the double teams because Wiley has to kind of fan out here. They bring Bates in motion. He's going to kick out this way. Conerly's going to actually wrap up, and the Bengals actually run kind of a stunt. So this defender is going to stunt inside. This linebacker is going to try to scrape to the edge, and then this safety back here is going to come all the way down and replace this linebacker. It's quite a nice stunt, and getting the safety down in the box to replace the linebacker. He's going to basically be unblocked, and he's going to be the reason this play doesn't go bigger. But the thing to notice is the stunt and how that affects what Bill can do. So the defender is going to stunt inside. The linebacker is going to try to scrape over the top. So you got Bates coming in motion, and he's going to try to kick out this defender, but the defender's stunting inside, as I say. So we'll run this through, snap the ball. You can see that defender stunting inside. Now Bates does a really nice job of taking on that block. Again, he's not as big as this defender. He's giving up size and power to him, but he fights really hard. He withstands the stunt initially, pauses the defender, and he fights hard to keep himself in front of him. But he does kind of give up that inside gap, which means Bill has to make a decision to bounce this run or cut it back inside where he can see that there's defenders filling and there's no real space for him to work backside. So he has to bounce this run outside. Now you can see the linebacker scraped over the top, and Conerly's actually done a really nice job because this linebacker has gone from the hash marks to all the way out here, and Conerly's climbed up and is still able to engage with him. That again, we already talked about Conerly, but this is a really nice job of being able to get out and get up to a linebacker and engage with the block in space. But what we'll see is that Bill will bounce this outside of Bates's block, and we'll just run that through. Nice little cut, and you can see again Conerly's doing a nice job on the edge out here, but the safety that replaced that linebacker stunting outside is completely unaccounted for because they weren't accounting for the safety in the blocking scheme, and that would have had to have come from a receiver outside, or just Bill's going to have to beat him. So, but because they get the nice blocks, Bill's able to bounce this run instead of what could have been a tackle for a very minimal gain inside. He's able to bounce the run outside, and then he's able to turn this up the field, run through an arm tackle, and then gets tackled by the linebacker. The kind of lane closes, but he still picks up 5 yards out of it. Like, it might not look like a spectacular run, but it's still a pretty good effort. Still picks up 5 yards, and a nice job of adapting to they ran that stunt, and he managed to make the most of it and probably make more of it than some other running backs would have done. So that was a decent start from him. He didn't quite get the scheme help that Rodriguez got on his first run, but on his second run, he did get the scheme help. So this is that same run that we saw earlier when we were just focused on Conerly with the down block. It's a GT counter scheme. It's one of their staple runs. It's one of their favorite runs that they ran last year. It was definitely one of their most effective. So you got the left guard, Chris Paul. He's going to pull and kick out this edge defender. You got Andrew Wiley's going to pull and wrap around and block the first defender that is in the end is going to be this nickel. I think it might be a safety, or it's like a big nickel defender in the box. He's going to block him. You're going to have Bates going to work up and block the first linebacker. In the end, he's actually going to block the second linebacker as well, but we'll get to that. And as we talked about earlier, Conerly's going to work with Allegretti and double team this defensive tackle and wash him down the line. And the idea is that you get this seal where you get the 2 down blocks inside, you get the 2 kickouts outside, and you create this nice lane for Bill to run through. From Bill's perspective, it's fairly easy because it's blocked so well, but he does have a couple nice little points to it. So we'll see here, he takes the handoff and he's not going immediately 100 miles an hour. He shows some nice tempo, some nice patience. He's letting these blocks set up nicely. So you can see Chris Paul gets the kick out on the edge defender. The edge defender gets a little bit upfield, and Paul adapts nicely and shoves him further upfield. And Bill has to just adapt a little bit his path and work around that, but he allows the blocks to set up. And he's still not going 100 miles an hour, so he allows Wiley to go and make this block on the outside. Now, the threat to him is this linebacker who is currently unblocked. Now, in an ideal world, the Conerly and Allegretti double team, one of them would have peeled off and got this guy. But in the end, Conerly kind of takes over the block and keeps washing the guy down the line, and Allegretti kind of gets lost in the kind of the traffic there. And that allows this guy to come free over the top. But Bill can see him. And what he does is he shows the patience through the hole. He lets Wiley set this block up. And instead of hitting this lane inside, he hits the lane between Wiley and Bates. And what that means is this defender has, rather than trying to run through here and potentially missing the tackle, he tries to go over the top. And Bates is able to get a 2-for-1. So you'll see Bates fights hard with the guy. You can see Bill makes a nice cut. As soon as Wiley engages, that's when he's like, okay, I am going to accelerate now. And this is one of his strengths, is burst and acceleration. And he accelerates to the sideline. He uses, as I say, that lane created between Bates and Wiley. And you can see what happens is Bates drives the first linebacker into the second linebacker who's trying to work over the top. And what that means is Bill is then just out to the edge and off to the races. The only guy with a chance of stopping him is the deep safety that's 15 yards away and in the middle of the field. He's not stopping him, and Bill gets to the end zone, probably in second gear there. I don't think he...
Yeah, I don't think he hit it that hard. Yeah, that's great.
No, I think he was kind of pulling up and going nice and easy there. And then gets his nice little end zone dance. So that was Bill's first series kind of with the starters. You saw he didn't get he got some scheme help on the touchdown run. He didn't get quite the scheme help that Chris Rodriguez got, but you saw some good traits from him there. On the next drive, they rotated them again. So Chris Rodriguez was back in. You'll notice that this is a backup offensive line's in now. Yeah, Wiley's not in at left tackle. Nick Allegretti's out at guard. So and Biotish is out at center. So Chris Paul's still in at left guard. Conerly's still in at right tackle, but you've got Dieter at right guard. You've got Julian Good-Jones at center and Trent Scott at tackle, and then you've got Ben Sinnott in at tight end instead of John Bates. Now, what they're going to run is very similar to what Chris Rodriguez ran on that first play where he got 40 yards. It's not quite the same scheme, but it's a trap scheme. Rather than all the guys pulling and going in different directions, it's just Sinnott trapping this nose tackle inside. But it's the same kind of idea, right? So we'll run this on, and you'll see this defender kind of anticipates that the way that Dieter kind of doesn't even try to block him, and neither does Julian Good-Jones. Neither of them do a good job of... These schemes are known as influence trap. And these guys are meant to kind of influence this defender by kind of going towards him together, making it look like a double team before peeling off at the last second and leaving the guy to then get whammed by this tight end. Neither of them really try to fake that block. They're both just trying to get up to the second level immediately. So that means this guy kind of catches onto it pretty quickly, but Sinnott's still able to go in there and fight hard to make that block and create that lane for Rodriguez to hit the outside. He does hit the outside. He does a nice job. Unfortunately, Dieter can't make his block on the linebacker, so he can't just hit that lane that he hit last time where he took it all the way up the field. But we see a nice cut from Rodriguez here. He gets a nice...
Yeah, I was impressed by that.
Yeah, he gets a nice sharp cut. He gets skinny in the hole. He gets inside. The linebacker still gets an arm on him, but he runs through the arm tackle, and that's something Rodriguez does really well, is he makes guys have to try to resort to arm tackles, and then he runs through those arm tackles really well. So you can see he runs through that arm tackle. He gets pushed backwards, but he still keeps his legs pumping. That's his other biggest trait, is he always keeps his legs pumping forward, and he's able to fall forward, and he ends up picking 9 yards off on that run. So
that was a good, powerful run.
Yeah.
Are you a Rodriguez guy, Mark? Do you like C-Rod?
I like him. I don't hype him up as much as I think the general fan base does. I like him. I think he can become a good running back. I think the number one problem he's always had has been fumbles. And until we see him carry the ball for a significant workload and not put the ball on the ground, I'm always going to be a little bit tentative on him. But, we might be about to see him get that opportunity. So one more Chris Rodriguez run, and then we'll wrap up with one more Bill run as well. So I know we've run a little bit over the hour, but we'll just finish off with two last plays. So this one is a draw play. So this one is, again, a little bit scheme help for Rodriguez. So the offensive line are all going to set back like it's a pass snap. And what you're going to see is you're going to see the edge defenders rush up the field like they're pass rushing, and then the offensive linemen are able to just rush them beyond the play. You're going to see the linebackers sink back like it's a pass play. They're sinking back into the coverage, and that creates this huge amount of space inside for Rodriguez to work with. So we'll run this one through. You can see these linebackers feel like it's a pass play. So you can see this linebacker is already eyeing the tight end and sinking back. You can see this linebacker is sinking back into coverage. The ends are trying to rush up the field. You get a little bit of a double team here, which is what they're looking for, but it's looking like it's more just the center trying to help out the right guard on the block, rather than like they're trying to drive him backwards on a run play. Then you get the delayed handoff, and you can see now that both ends are basically already run beyond Chris Rodriguez, so they're kind of out of the play. Chris Paul's holding up his guy one-on-one, and that means you got this double team on the nose tackle and all this space to work with. Because the linebackers have already got deep on their drops thinking it's a pass play. Now we get to this point, and Chris Rodriguez has a decision to make, right? He can either hit this inside and run up the field and hope that Good-Jones peels off and goes and blocks that linebacker, or he can bounce this outside, see that Jaylen Lane's come flying in here to try to block this nickel corner or this safety, and trust that Lane's going to make that block, and he can then beat the corner that's replacing on the outside. Now, initially, he thinks I'm better to bounce this outside and take this outside. I'm not sure exactly the decision he makes in a minute. You'll see this here. He kind of just steps inside and then is like, no, I don't like that. And I don't know whether this is Jaylen Lane trying to block someone. I don't trust Jaylen Lane trying to block someone, or whether it's the corner is out here and I don't think I can hit that corner, or beat that corner on the edge. Or maybe it's just, I think I can beat this linebacker to this spot now that I've kind of made that step outside. He stepped forward inside, and now Julian Good-Jones has an angle to go reach him. So it might just be that he's trying to set up this linebacker with that move outside, and then cutting back inside. But what happens is he moves as he cuts back inside. Julian Good-Jones wants to climb up and try to block this linebacker. You can't tell 100% from this angle, But I think this defensive tackle, you can kind of see his arm here is on the shoulder pad of Good Jones. I think he holds him and grabs him and stops him from climbing up to the second level. You can't tell 100% from this angle, but I think he gets away with it. You can see Good Jones kind of has his arm kind of locked in there. He can't get away and go climb up cleanly.
His jersey getting tugged a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's what I think happens and stops him from getting up to here. But Chris Rodriguez still, again, you can see here, he's reaching out with his arm, but he's still got this arm kind of trapped inside. I think this defender is still holding it, but you can't see it from this angle, so I can't say 100% that's what happens. Either way, he still picked up a nice gain, but it was, and again, he initially breaks through the arm tackle, fights off for more contact and falls forward, keeps his leg pumping and picks up 8 yards. So it's a good run, but it's another one where I think the scheme probably helped him a little bit more than it was him making great decisions and an amazing cut, an amazing play. So we'll wrap up with one more Bill run. Now, Bill got the bulk of the workload in the third quarter, where it was the real backup offensive line in there. There was no Josh Conerly here, no Chris Paul here at left guard. It's really the backups here. And that really killed the momentum of the run game. They really struggled in the second half to get anything going. I think Bill had 6 consecutive runs where his total for the 6 carries was -1 yard. And none of them were his fault. Like, he wasn't like missing obvious holes and making bad decisions. It was just the blocking was bad and he couldn't really have done anything about it. But this was one nice run that he did have. He picked up 11 yards on this play. It's a little counter scheme, so you're gonna have Sinnott go in motion across to being this kind of H-back, fullback hybrid player. You're going to have the guard pull and kick out, and then Sinnott's going to try to follow him and wrap around for the linebacker. So we'll run this through. The issue that comes up for the blocking scheme is this defensive end spots the guard pulling and is like, okay, well, I know the guard's pulling, so I'm going to stunt inside and stop you from creating this lane inside. Obviously, we talked about it on the GT counter. This is a different form of counter, but the idea is you're trying to create a seal between these pullers that kick out guys on the edge and these offensive linemen that are blocking down inside. You're trying to create that lane in between that. So this defensive end sees that and immediately tries to get into that lane to stop that from happening. And you can see at the point of engagement, he dives inside. And what that means is that Sinnott can't just run through and go and block the linebacker. He gets kind of blown up by that while trying to get to the linebacker. But Bill sees that and sees, okay, well, I can't take my initial path. I'll just go off instinct, bounce this run outside. So he does that. He bounces outside. The corner comes in, does a nice job trying to work down to the line of scrimmage and crack replace. The linebacker that Sinnott was meant to block, but Sinnott's now on the ground, peels off. And what you end up getting is you get two defenders closing in on him. But Bill does a really nice job showing his acceleration, his burst, his ability to change direction at speed, and he bursts through that gap between them, makes both guys kind of miss, and then breaks through an arm tackle, a defender working backwards before a fourth guy eventually gets him wrapped up and brings him down. So that was just a really nice run from Bill, kind of going off script, but trying to stay on script as much as possible, and showing that burst and that ability to make guys miss. And yeah, I thought if you're picking one of those two guys to start, I guess, Chris Rodriguez is a little bit more experienced, and you're still trying to work out exactly what you have in a 7th rounder in cross-scheme merit. You don't necessarily want to give that guy like 20 carries week 1 straight away. Although, Alfred Morris showed that that's a possibility. But I think from what I saw of both guys, like I talked about it a little bit, the scheme helped Chris Rodriguez a little bit. And that's not to say Rodriguez played badly. He had some really nice runs and did some nice things on those runs. But the scheme helped him more than it helped Bill. And Bill did a nice job of working off the scheme and creating his own yards. So that was a little bit more encouraging in my eyes. But we'll see whether going into the regular season, Bill ends up being RB1 or whether it's, Chris Rodriguez or whether they just kind of split and go with the hot hand. All the options are on the table with Brian Robinson seemingly done.
I agree. So I definitely think there's some diversity in the run game. They can kind of play the hot hand. At the top of the show, we talked about Brian Robinson, and you said that maybe the goal is to find a running back that can produce at 80% of Brian Robinson at a fraction of the cost. Maybe that's Chris Rodriguez. I thought looking at that film work right there, I felt that he ran with power. As you talked about, his legs were churning. He fought for extra yards. So maybe he's that thumper back that Brian Robinson could have done at a fraction of the cost at a younger rate. And on top of that, we have Krosky Merritt as someone who has a change of pace. And I think it's funny. I feel like there are some egos with coaches, and I feel like there was intention going into this game. Like the first 4 plays are all just power run plays. Okay, we're going to send a message that we can do this, and we kind of saw the explosiveness there. So it'll be kind of interesting to chart that throughout the year. My last question, Mark, before we wrap it all up, there are some, recapping on the show. Conerly showed some growth. He kind of corrected some mistakes over the past couple of weeks. Jaylen Lane showing some nuance with his with his route running and catching. And our running backs seem to have a little bit of power. It's kind of a hard question, but who impressed you the most out of everyone we talked about from last week?
I think the one that impressed me the most was Conerly, because we saw the clear improvements from last week to this week. And it's not easy to improve drastically week to week like that. And it shows that he's identifying problems in his game and correcting them quickly. As I kind of talked about last week, those issues in his game weren't like major issues. They were things that in theory are easy fixes, but it takes time to kind of rep them and get your body used to the muscle memory of how you need to fix those things. And obviously the mental side of it is plays a factor in that as well. Remembering, in this situation, I need to do this kind of set. And when I have a chipper, I don't need to be as aggressive of getting onto the guys as I do when I don't have chip help and that kind of thing. But it's good to see that, from one week to another, he made some significant improvements from the issues that he had the previous week. So I think we saw the biggest jump from him. Lane also impressed me a hell of a lot. I just think we saw the signs of it last week. He just didn't get the ball, whereas he got the ball a little bit more this week, and it was a little bit more obvious. But the signs from last week were still there this week. So I'm impressed by both, but I think Conerly kind of took the bigger jump this week.
So walking away, just from the very beginning, I've always been a Conerly fan. I kind of feel like he is maybe a year away. I think he's kind of young, so he's growing to his body, but I think he has that athleticism. I think he has the intellect. That was great film work there. I think Conerly's long-term has some great potential, but Jaylen Lane impressed me last week, as you kind of alluded to, because I think he might be a wide receiver that can contribute this year. I thought he may have been more of like a trick player, more of a gadget player this year, but it seemed like he has more nuance than I gave him credit for, so I'm excited about that. Mark, thank you for that film breakdown. It was fantastic. Thank you to the 1,159 people that watched us live on our show today. I definitely appreciate that as well. You can follow Mark Bullock on Substack. It's Mark Bullock Film Room. He does fantastic work. Definitely get him subscribed there. I'm George Carmi at Carmi21 on X. Give me a follow there. Follow Mark on X as well. Guys, we're going to try to come up with Wednesday shows consistently, especially as the season goes on. And thank you for watching, guys. Take care and have a great week. Peace.